Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and most welcome guests. Monsters. Some people are deathly afraid of them, while other people don't even believe they exist. But I am here to tell you today about a very real monster. And this monster is very scary. It has an insatiable appetite, and no matter how much it gets fed, it gets hungrier and hungrier. We are going to be in real trouble when the day comes that we can no longer feed the monster. So what does this monster eat, you want to know? It eats debt. This monster is our debt-addicted economy, and it is growing ever more out of control. To demonstrate the nature of this economy, I'm going to call forward our Madam Chartmaster. And our Madam Chartmaster is going to create a chart for us so that we can look at the patterns of addiction over time. So on the horizontal axis, this is going to represent time, and this is our behavior axis. What happens in the case of drug addiction is that over time, the effects of the drug tend to go down. Meanwhile, the addicted person has to continue to consume ever more of the drug in order to just sustain. It goes up in an exponential fashion. Similarly, the debt in our country over the past 100 years has been increasing exponentially, the very same pattern as addiction. Meanwhile, the economic growth compared to the dollar of debt that has been created has been going down. Thank you, Madam Chartmaster. So how did this monster get addicted to debt? First, we have to understand how debt, what I call debt money, is created. So first of all, by a show of hands, who in here has been a recipient of the government printing of money, where money gets printed up and divvied out to all the citizens? Any hands? Has anyone gotten money divvied out to them? Okay, it doesn't actually work this way. The government doesn't just print money and hand it out to everybody. The way that money is created is through the issuance of debt. So debt can be issued in two ways. It can be issued through personal loans that a bank makes, or it can be issued through treasury bonds by the U.S. government. Essentially, when a debt is created, let's say by a bank, the new debt, you get extended a loan from your banker, for example, and that debt gets written on the books at the bank. The trick is, however, you have to pay that debt back plus interest. Those interest dollars, though, were never created on the books. They don't exist. Therefore, there is not enough money to pay back debt plus any amount of interest. So what happens? What's the solution to this? Well, year over year, more debt is created because we've got to create enough money to be able to pay back not only the debt, but the interest from the previous year. Hence, the exponential growth of debt in our economy. Now, some will look at that and go, well, we can't sustain that forever, especially when our income has only been growing arithmetically, not exponentially. How can we keep up with this debt? There's going to come a point in time where we can't afford any more interest. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I am here to tell you that I believe we have reached that point in our nation's history. And this is evidenced by the recession in 2008, in which a record number of households went into default and could no longer not only pay their debt, but take on any more debt. As a result, as an emergency action, our government took on record debt loads. They took out bailout packages, stimulus packages, record deficits, all so that we could keep up with this hungry debt monster. Now, what is currently facing our Congress is they're trying to put together our national budget, and one of the most contentious points is the raising of our debt ceiling, raising the amount of total debt we can actually take on as a nation. And The challenge that the Treasury is saying, if we do not do this, come April 2nd, our U.S. government will default on some of its Treasury bonds. We are at that point where we can take on no more debt. And you might be saying, okay, wait a minute here. We're at a point where we can't afford our interest. So the solution is we got to take out more debt? They want to raise the debt ceiling so we can have more debt to pay this interest? That's going to create more interest that we can't afford? Let me tell you, the only way for someone to get off a drug addiction is to abstain from taking the drug. And yes, it will be painful. It will be the most painful thing economically we have ever experienced in this nation's history when we get off our debt addiction. The good news, however, is that this debt monster is something that we created. It is something, and it's also not a real living thing. It is a system with rules, with roles, processes, structures. It is something that can be changed by our Congress. Or, as individuals, we can come up with alternative ways to exchange with one another that is not dependent on debt money. We do not have to be the victims of this debt monster. We can be the heroes who pave a new way.